riding bulls, chasing dreams, and hiding a secret that could end everything. In the heart of Texas, where the dust rises and the crowd roars, two cowboys find themselves drawn to something far more dangerous than the rodeo itself: each other. What happens when desire collides with tradition? When stolen moments in the shadows become impossible to ignore? This is a story of passion, risk, and love that refuses to be tamed. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss more powerful stories like this. Stories of love, courage, and the fight to be true to yourself. Now, let's ride into this intense and unforgettable journey. The Texas heat was merciless, baking the rodeo grounds under a sky so wide it felt endless. Dust kicked up with every stomp of a boot, every restless snort of a bull waiting behind the chutes. The air smelled of leather, sweat, and adrenaline, the scent of competition, of survival. I pulled my hat lower over my eyes, adjusting the grip on my rope as I leaned against the fence. This was my life. 8 seconds on the back of a beast that wanted nothing more than to throw me into the dirt. 8 seconds of control in a world where control was an illusion. And then, he walked in. Jace Walker. He had been tearing through the rodeo circuit all season, his name spreading like wildfire. The kind of cowboy that made headlines, fearless, fast, impossible to shake. But what struck me wasn't the reputation. It was him. Tall, lean muscle beneath dust-streaked denim, his white pearl-snap shirt clinging to his frame, sweat lining the brim of his black Stetson. His sleeves were rolled up just enough to reveal strong forearms, veins standing out as he adjusted his glove. His jaw was sharp, dusted with stubble, and when he turned his head, his steel blue eyes locked onto mine. Something inside me twisted. I looked away fast, clearing my throat, forcing my focus back to my bull. This was not the place for thoughts like that. Not here, not in Texas, not in the middle of a damn rodeo. Jace stepped closer, his boots kicking up dust as he leaned against the same fence just a few feet away. "Rhett Dawson," he said, his voice smooth as the whiskey I wished I had right now. "Didn't expect to see you back this season." I kept my grip tight on the rope, nodding without looking at him. "Guess I ain't easy to get rid of." He let out a slow chuckle, deep and low. "Good. I like a challenge." My pulse stuttered. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him watching me. Too close, too knowing. Jace had this way of looking at you, like he could see more than what you let people see, like he wasn't just staring, but studying. The gate clanged open behind us, and a bull exploded out of the chute, sending another cowboy straight to the dirt. The crowd roared. I used the distraction to step back, put space between us. But space didn't change anything. Because later that night, when the dust had settled and the lights dimmed over the arena, I found him again. Or maybe, he found me. The rodeo bathrooms were old, barely standing, the flickering light above the mirror casting long shadows against the stained tile. I had just splashed cold water on my face, trying to cool the fire in my chest, when I heard the door swing open. I didn't have to look to know it was him. Jace's boots scuffed against the floor, slow, measured. The air between us was thick with something neither of us wanted to name. I kept my eyes on the sink. "You following me now?" A pause. Then, a click of the lock behind us. My breath caught. "Wouldn't have to if you'd quit running," Jace said, his voice softer now, but still carrying that dangerous edge. I turned, heart slamming against my ribs. He was right there, close, too close. His eyes weren't just looking at me. They were searching me, testing the boundary I had spent my whole life building. I should have pushed past him, walked away, pretended that whatever had been buzzing between us since the first time we locked eyes wasn't real. But then, he reached out, fingers grazing the edge of my belt, slow, deliberate. I sucked in a breath, my stomach clenching. "Jace, tell me to stop," he murmured. I couldn't, because for the first time in my life, I didn't want him to. Jace's fingers hovered at the edge of my belt, his touch barely there, but it burned like fire. My breath hitched, my entire body locked in place, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The rodeo bathroom was silent except for the flickering light overhead and the distant hum of the afterparty outside. Voices, music, laughter, a world that could never know what was happening in here. Jace tilted his head slightly, watching me like he was daring me to make a move, daring me to admit what I had spent years denying. "Tell me to stop, Rhett," he murmured again. His voice was smooth, deep, laced with something I couldn't place. I swallowed hard. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to shut this down, to push him away, to pretend this was some mistake, a misunderstanding. But it wasn't, and we both knew it. I could still feel the heat of his body, the way his hand rested against my abdomen, the tension crackling between us like a live wire. I exhaled shakily. "You don't know what you're doing." Jace let out a small, almost amused huff. "You think I don't?" His thumb brushed against my belt buckle and I swore my knees nearly buckled. I grabbed his wrist, gripping it tight, not to stop him, but because I needed something to hold on to. "Jace," I warned, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned in closer, his breath warm against my neck. "What are you so afraid of, Cowboy?" I snapped my head up, our eyes locking. Afraid? Of course, I was afraid. This wasn't just some reckless night. This wasn't some meaningless mistake I could forget in the morning. This was real. I could feel it in the way my body reacted to him, in the way my pulse raced, in the way my grip on his wrist tightened instead of letting go. I wanted this. I wanted him. And that scared me more than any bull I'd ever ridden. Outside, the sound of boots crunching against gravel made both of us freeze. Someone was coming. Reality slammed back into me. I pushed Jace away, not hard, but enough to break whatever spell had held us in place. His eyes darkened, but he took the hint. He stepped back just as the bathroom door rattled. I turned, yanking the faucet back on, pretending like I had just been washing up. Jace ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly before fixing his belt. The door swung open. Another cowboy stepped in. Bobby Lane, a guy I'd known for years. He glanced between us, his brow slightly furrowed. "Y'all good?" he asked, his voice casual, but there was curiosity there, suspicion. I forced a tight nod. "Yeah, just cleaning up." Bobby nodded slowly, then looked at Jace. "Walker, your name's up next. You ready?" Jace smirked, running his thumb over his belt loop. "Always." Bobby chuckled, oblivious to the tension still hanging thick in the air. "See you out there." He left without another word. As soon as the door shut, Jace turned back to me. His smirk was gone. His jaw was tight. "You gonna keep running?" he asked, his voice softer now. I clenched my fists. "This ain't a game, Jace." His eyes searched mine, something raw flashing in them. "I know." We stood there, neither of us speaking. Then, without another word, he walked out. Leaving me standing there, my chest heaving, my pulse pounding. Because for the first time, I didn't just want to run, I wanted to follow him. The roar of the crowd echoed through the night, the announcer's voice booming over the speakers as the next rider prepared to take on the bull. The energy in the arena was electric, the kind that got into your bones and made your pulse race. But my pulse wasn't racing from the competition. It was from him. Jace Walker sat on the edge of the chute, one gloved hand gripping the rope tight, the other adjusting his hat. Like nothing had just happened, like we hadn't just been locked in a bathroom with enough tension to snap steel. I stood by the fence, arms crossed, watching him. He hadn't looked at me since he walked out, and that pissed me off. I didn't even know why. I was the one who had shoved him away. I was the one who had refused to admit what was happening between us. So why the hell did I want him to look at me now? The gate clanged open, and Jace's bull exploded into the arena. The beast twisted hard, trying to throw him, but Jace held on, his body moving like he was born to do this. 8 seconds. That's all he had to last. The longest, shortest 8 seconds of his life. I found myself gripping the metal railing, my breath stuck in my throat. Jace was good. Damn good. But something was wrong. The bull kicked sideways, and for the first time, Jace faltered. Shit. His grip slipped just enough to break his rhythm, and then he was airborne. He hit the dirt hard. I was already moving before I realized it. The rodeo clowns ran in, distracting the bull while Jace rolled onto his back, gasping for air. I jumped over the fence and ran straight to him. "What the hell are you doing, Dawson?" one of the officials barked, but I ignored him. Jace was already sitting up, shaking his head like he was trying to clear it. Dirt smudged his jaw, his hat knocked loose. He winced, his arm pressed to his ribs. "You good?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He looked up at me then, finally. Those steel blue eyes locked onto mine, something flickering behind them. He smirked. "You worried about me, Cowboy?" My jaw clenched. Damn him. Even now, even hurt, he still had that cocky drawl in his voice. "You ride like an idiot," I muttered. Jace chuckled, rubbing his ribs. "And yet, you came running." I gritted my teeth. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to stop looking at me like that. But there were people watching. The announcer was calling for the next rider. I had seconds before someone started asking questions, so I did the only thing I could. I grabbed his hat off the dirt, dusted it off, and shoved it against his chest. "Try not to get yourself killed, Walker." Then I turned and walked away. My heart was still pounding, not from the rodeo, from him. The adrenaline from the arena still pulsed through my veins long after the crowd had settled. Jace had walked away with nothing more than bruised ribs and that damn cocky smirk on his face, but I couldn't shake the feeling in my chest. I should have let it go. I should have walked away like it was just another ride, just another close call, but I couldn't. Not after the bathroom. Not after the way he looked at me. The after-party was in full swing by the time I made it to the back of the rodeo grounds. Cowboys, buckle bunnies, and ranch hands crowded around trucks, drinking under the dim glow of hanging string lights. Someone had a speaker blasting country music, and a few couples were already swaying in the dirt, lost in the buzz of the night. I wasn't here for any of that. I was here for him. I spotted Jace leaning against a fence near the horse trailers, a beer in hand, talking to a group of cowboys I barely recognized. He looked too relaxed, too damn sure of himself, and I hated that it made my stomach tighten. As if he could feel my eyes on him, he looked up and grinned. That slow, lazy grin that said, "I know what's in your head, Dawson." I exhaled sharply, shoving my hands into my pockets. I shouldn't have come here. Before I could turn back, Jace pushed off the fence and made his way toward me, weaving through the crowd like he had all the time in the world. "You lost, Cowboy?" he asked, stopping just close enough that no one else could hear. I clenched my jaw. "Just making sure you ain't dead." Jace chuckled, taking a slow sip of his beer. "That why you were staring at me from across the yard?" My pulse spiked. I glanced around, making sure no one was paying attention. "Keep your damn voice down." Jace tilted his head, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Why? You afraid someone might think you actually give a damn about me?" My hands balled into fists. Jace. He leaned in, his voice dropping low. If you want to talk, meet me behind the barn. 5 minutes. Then he turned and walked away, like he hadn't just knocked the air out of my lungs. I should have left. I should have ignored him, climbed in my truck and driven straight back to my motel. But 5 minutes later, I found myself behind the barn. Jace was already there, leaning against the wall, arms crossed. The only light came from the moon above and the distant glow of the party. The moment he saw me, his smirk faded. You showing up here means something, Dawson. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. You don't know what you're talking about. Jace took a slow step forward. The hell I don't. I tensed as he reached for me, not grabbing, just testing. His fingers ghosted over my belt, just like in the bathroom. My breath hitched. You ran last time, he murmured. You gonna run again? I should have, but instead, I grabbed his wrist, not to push him away, to hold on. Jace's lips parted slightly, like he hadn't expected it. Like he had been waiting for me to stop fighting. The air between us crackled, thick with something we couldn't name, something we shouldn't be doing. And still, neither of us moved away. Then, footsteps, voices, too close. We snapped apart just in time to see 2 cowboys walking past, laughing, drunk, oblivious to the fact that I had just been seconds away from doing something I could never take back. Jace swallowed hard, running a hand over his mouth. This ain't over, he said, his voice rough. And for the first time, I didn't argue. I barely slept that night. Lying in the small motel bed, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles, I replayed every second of what had happened behind that barn, how close we had been, how reckless, how damn good it felt to finally stop running. But I wasn't stupid. This wasn't just some bar hookup in the city. This was Texas. This was Rodeo. This was my entire life, and if the wrong person found out, it would be over. The next day, I threw everything I had into the competition, using the fear, the frustration, the craving for something I couldn't have to keep my focus on the ride. My bull was a monster, kicking hard, twisting sharp, but I held on. 8 seconds. When the whistle blew, I let go, hitting the dirt with a perfect roll before jumping to my feet. The crowd erupted, but the only thing I cared about was one person. Jace. He stood by the chutes, arms crossed, hat tilted forward just enough to shadow his eyes. But I could feel it. The way he was watching me. The way he had been watching me all damn day. And I wanted him to keep looking. The sun was setting by the time I made my way back to the trailers, my body aching in the best way. I just wanted a hot shower and maybe a beer. But the second I stepped into the empty rodeo grounds, I felt him. Nice ride, Dawson. I turned, and there he was, leaning against my trailer, hands in his pockets, looking at me like he had been waiting for this exact moment. I let out a slow breath. What do you want, Jace? His lips quirked. Same thing you do. My pulse spiked. I should have walked away. Instead, I stepped closer. Jace didn't move. He just watched, eyes locked on mine, waiting to see what I'd do. I clenched my jaw. This ain't a good idea. His voice was low, steady. Then why are you still standing here? I exhaled sharply, running a hand over my face. Damn him. Because I can't stop thinking about you, I admitted, my voice rough. Jace's breath hitched, just barely, but I caught it. Then stop fighting it, he murmured. I took another step, one step too close. I could feel the heat of him now, the scent of sweat and leather, the tension pulling us together like gravity. His fingers brushed against my belt, light, teasing, just enough to remind me of what I wanted. my hands fisted at my sides. "This ain't safe," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Jace smirked. "Nothing worth having ever is." And then he kissed me. It wasn't slow. It wasn't gentle. It was everything we had been holding back, everything we had been pretending wasn't there. I let out a sharp breath against his mouth, grabbing onto his shirt and pulling him closer. Finally, his hands found my waist, sliding over my belt, fingers pressing into my skin through the fabric. I could feel the hard muscle of his chest, the way his breathing hitched when I kissed him back just as hard. For a moment, nothing else existed. Not the rodeo, not the risk, not the fear. Just us. Then, a sound. The sharp crunch of boots on gravel. We tore apart just in time. A voice called out, "Dawson, you back here?" Jace stepped away fast, his breath heavy, his eyes dark with something I wasn't ready to name. I turned, wiping a hand over my mouth, heart hammering. "Yeah," I called back, forcing my voice steady. "Be right there." Footsteps faded. The moment was gone, but Jace was still there, still looking at me, still wanting me. "This ain't over," he said, echoing his own words from the night before. And this time, I didn't argue, because he was right, and we both knew it. I barely remembered walking back to the group after that. My legs felt like they didn't belong to me, my mind still stuck in that damn kiss. Jace Walker had just taken everything I'd spent years hiding, denying, praying away, and dragged it into the open. Even if no one else knew, I knew, and so did he. The rest of the night blurred. I laughed when I was supposed to, talked to the other cowboys like nothing had changed. But every time I looked up, he was there, watching me, waiting, like he knew I wasn't done with him yet. And God help me, I wasn't. By the time the party started dying down, I was already moving, my boots hitting the dirt, my body making the decision before my mind could catch up. I found him behind the trailers, standing there like he'd been expecting me. We didn't speak. We didn't have to. The second I got close enough, his hands were on me, fisting my shirt, pulling me forward, crashing his mouth against mine. This time I didn't hesitate, didn't fight it. I grabbed his belt, yanking him closer until we were flush against each other, heat radiating between us, fast, desperate, reckless. Jace let out a low groan against my lips, his fingers skimming under my shirt, finding bare skin. I shuddered at the touch, gripping the back of his neck, pulling him deeper into the kiss. Damn him. Damn me. I didn't care about anything but this. Him. Us. The world could burn for all I cared. But then, the worst possible thing happened. The snap of a camera, a flash, and a voice. "Well, I'll be damned." My blood ran cold. We ripped apart. Jace spun around, shielding me with his body, but it was too late. Standing just a few feet away, holding a damn phone, was Bobby Lane. His face was pure shock, disbelief, maybe even disgust. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Bobby, what the hell is this?" he hissed, eyes darting between us. "You too." Silence. Jace tensed beside me. He was waiting for my move, for me to say something, for me to do what I'd always done, run. But I didn't. I took a slow breath, my hands still shaking, and I stepped forward. And for the first time in my life, I didn't deny it. I lifted my chin, met Bobby's stare head on, and said, "Yeah, it's exactly what it looks like." Jace exhaled sharply, like he hadn't expected me to say it. Hell, maybe I hadn't expected it either. Bobby's grip tightened on his phone, his face unreadable. I didn't move. I didn't break. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. Not from Jace, not from myself, not from anyone. Rhett spent his whole life hiding, running, pretending, but at some point the truth catches up to you. At some point you have to stop being afraid. Have you ever felt like you had to hide who you are? Have you ever been afraid to let people see the real you? Because the hardest thing isn't loving someone. It's finding the courage to let the world know you do. If this story hit you, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because love is never the problem. Fear is.